following up on that, it's interesting. I got a call today from a reporter from USA Today. Is that the major
Yes.
daily newspaper? It's national, and they were very intrigued by Michigan's economic development program, in particular the Wixom project that is converting, or could definitely be a robust opportunity to convert the old Ford Wixom plant that used to build T-Birds and I believe
town cars,
yeah. And it's been mothballed, but it is seeing some possible new life, regeneration with renewable energy. And so we have at least two partners, one from Houston, Texas, another from California. One is Extreme Energy, and they're really able to build storage components for large-scale battery usage, like to power a whole plant or a home or big things. This is not just for cars. And then also solar photovoltaic systems. I love that term, but this is, as you know, the renewable energy, the green energy. There's a lot of federal dollars flowing in around the country. Michigan has amassed quite a bit of those incentives, if you will, already from the federal government. But they will be manufacturing. So perhaps what you're saying, harnessing those kind of opportunities, of course there always has to be the investment behind it so that they can actually take over and produce the 2,500 up to 4,000 jobs that they're predicting. Today, we took the first step and we did pass some legislation to give a battery credit to Extreme Energy, and they're going to apply to the federal government, put in an application to see if they can also get some underwriting dollars to proceed ahead. But with all this, Patrick, I wanted to make sure, along with several of my colleagues in the Senate, that we were going to be able to ensure greater transparency and disclosure within the workings of our Economic Development Corporation, because they have pretty much had a free hand at making decisions on what companies will get a credit, as you know, a refundable credit, which abates all their property taxes, and even potentially, if the credit is greater than their taxes, sends them a check in the mail over time. So their activities in many ways has been out of the general purview, if you will, of the legislature. We are now reasserting the legislature's power in that regard to have oversight and accountability, so then we can do what you're talking about, be able to measure with real data, real job data, real investment figures, and then the cost to the state, and whether or not the programs are fulfilling their performance. Otherwise, quite frankly, it's been guesswork. Mm-hmm. So this transparency legislation is attached to a bill that would allow MEDC to expand for this year only 85 more credit hours. It's kind of interesting. It's done according to credit hours, but we are attaching greater transparency, and I firmly believe that it is the public's right to know, and that there has to be truth in advertising, and above all, that our public, our taxpayers, can have confidence in legislators in making the decisions around any economic development program to be sure it works, because taxpayer dollars are funding this. And we are, as you know, right now in a budget crisis. I'm not exactly sure how much this year alone in tax expenditures are out there, but it's considerably over $100 million. Mm-hmm. And so we have a responsibility to evaluate and get the information to do our job. What do you think?
I applaud your efforts to bring some accountability and transparency to tax incentives. There is a role for an agency like the MEDC or agencies like Automation Alley and Detroit Economic Growth Corporation that actively try on a private basis to encourage economic development. In fact, I think those organizations tend to do a better job in terms of thinking what we can really do well as opposed to state agencies. There's a role for them to play and for them to make judgments about what's likely to work better than others. But ultimately, if you have major state tax policy, in particular refundable credits or outright subsidies like the film credit, you are talking about taxpayer dollars heavily involved with the private enterprise, and there ought to be some accountability on that if the private company is saying, oh, if you give us this money, we're going to do this. Now, of course, at the same time, we ought to be asking ourselves the question, why do we have to give credits and incentives for people to locate business here? Fundamentally, the answer to turn Michigan around is not we're going to get a whole lot smarter at incentives. That's part of the answer about managing our money wisely. But we do need to address, in some cases, cost disadvantages in areas where we've just made it expensive to do business here. And that is something that I know also you've been working on.
Right.
And we want tax incentives to be used judiciously and wisely, but not as the primary incentive for people to come here. They have to want to come here because we have good workers that can perform services well, and they can sell that and make a profit and live in a beautiful state.
Absolutely, and you and I have had this discussion about the proper role of incentives, but also the kind of business climate we're trying to create. Right now, the MBT, Michigan Business Tax, and this 22% surcharge that was attached to it has become extremely problematic for our businesses, especially our small businesses that are struggling. And yet we can't afford to ease out, phase down the surcharge, get rid of it, and we're working on that, unless we also reevaluate the incentives like the film credit and maybe scale that back. That's just new spending. It's new spending, but scale it back along with some of the other incentives, how important that might be. Give us just the rationale briefly, if you would, for broad-based tax relief across the board to make a state more competitive, as opposed to having this litany, if you will, chest box full of tools to provide credits. What is your evaluation?
If you look at states that are successful, they're states that have a good value proposition for the investor, for the employer. They're states where you have some predictability about going in, you're going to be able to hire people and pay them a certain amount, you're going to pay a certain amount in taxes, you're going to have your property rights secured, your contracts enforced, police protection, things like that. That's what you need to have. And what we've done in Michigan is we've created a high tax cost for our employers. We're much higher than the most competitive states, like states Ohio, just off our southern border, that has moved in now into the top 10 of business tax rankings because they addressed their problems. They eliminated their personal property tax, they changed their tax, and now they advertise all around the country, come to Ohio.
I think what you're saying is there's more work to be done, and this is a critical issue for Michigan, not to rely just on all these tax credits, but also move forward to tax reform. Thank you for being my guest. I really appreciate it. Very good. Thanks.